Wala ka nang hina. Chill yun.
Inabot na po yung unan dyan. Ikaw, hindi ka rin nakikinig dyan sa akin eh.
Hindi, oo, ako naman sa kanya.
Iniiwas nga kita sa ano eh, para hindi ka masisakay. Gusto mo rin. Tapos nagagalit ka. Hindi natin sarili to. Dun sa taas ang sarili. Dito, nakikisa.
Hindi naman ako naggalit sa akin si Kuya. Ang gusto ka naman ni Kuya tumulong ako sa inyo. Diba? Tutulong naman ako.
Hindi tinutulong.
Gusto niya dun ako sa taas. Hindi dun ako sa taas. Para malinis-linis. Ako maglilinis. Ako mag-aayos.
Napapagawa yung bahay natin.
Kala mo ano? Isag-buwasag mo. Ano? Paano maano? Sana mabaklas taas yun. Hindi ba kayo mabaklas taas talaga?
Hello and welcome into the 5 best chess opening traps in the central game. The central game occurs after the first move pawn to e4, pawn to e5, here comes d4. Therefore you can implement these traps in your practical games really easily. Moreover, we're not only gonna see these beautiful games, which are really amazing, but also you'll be able to train your tactical vision along the way, and I'll show you how you can find beautiful tactical shots. Anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead with the trap number 1. It's actually the game of David Bernstein playing white, who is one of the legendary players of the past. As you may notice, it's actually somewhat similar to the Scandinavian defense with the reverse colors. Black plays knight 6, knight c3, so far everything is very logical. Black plays pawn to d5, also seems good. And here comes the first good move from Bernstein. A lot of players in similar situations take pawn automatically, but if you follow me for a long time, you know that take is a mistake, and you've got to increase the pressure, which is exactly what Bernstein did. He played bishop to g5. He actually attacks that knight on f6 that controls these same squares e4 and d5, therefore Bernstein tries to put more and more pressure on the black center. Black captured the pawn, white recapture, and here black plays queen to e7. And it looks like white is in some sort of little bit trouble because of that king on the knight along the e-file, and the knight can't move away because there's the white king behind it. Again, it may seem like the only thing that white should be doing is either protecting this knight or maybe taking with the bishop to black's knight on f6. But Bernstein did a pretty cool thing. Instead, he just really ignored the black strategy, made long costly. And perhaps his opponent thought that Bernstein just did not realize that black can't simply grab the knight, which he did by playing queen takes e4. But there was a great tactical shot that you can try to find by yourself here before I'm going to show it to you. Therefore, you have 5 seconds to think about this position. It is white to play. How would you play here as white? Can you find the winning move? After this move, black actually just resigned right away. This is the move rook to d8, which sounds like a shocker, like a very unexpected move, with the purpose of provoking black's king to go to d8, because black can't capture with the knight, it is pinned by the queen, and therefore black has to capture the rook by the king, which puts the black king under the pin. And while the black knight is pinned, now white can grab the black queen for nothing. So he can't recapture because the knight is pinned by the bishop. Because of that, white wins the queen and black just resigns. A really beautiful combination by white, and that was the first trap that I wanted to share with you. And as you can see, all the moves by both sides are pretty natural, and therefore it's a really cool thing. Before we move on, let me just give you a quick tip on how you can find this kind of moves yourself, in case you couldn't find it. Don't worry, it was a very soft move, and therefore if you could notice it yourself, it's a absolutely normal thing. How can you find a move like that? The rule says you always need to look for check. If you can check opponent's king, there is the only thing that your opponent can do, which is to move the king or to protect the king. And therefore it makes your calculation very easy because you know exactly what your opponent is going to do. You don't have to go play tons of operations. Therefore, as I say, check a check, right? Check if you can produce a check. And if you follow this simple rule, check a check, you will find a great quantity of forcing winning continuations. Alright, let's move on to the trap number 2. Of course, it begins by the first move e4, e5, pawn to d4, the central game, and the first moves are very common, knight to c6, and here white plays queen e3, which is actually the main move in this operation. By the way, I gotta say that even though central game is probably not the strongest opening of all, but it's still a pretty decent choice, and you may try it from time to time, especially in the blitz games. It could be a dangerous weapon. Here black plays bishop to b4. Fairly often black refrain from putting the knight to f6 because they worry that you're going to push it by your pawn to e5, and therefore black tries to come up with some other sound alternative. And that's how black can start playing something like bishop e4. White push the bishop away, went back to a5, white plays bishop c4, black develops his knight to e7. I guess the reason is still the same. Black worries that in case the knight goes to f6, white can kick it away by pushing the pawn forward, and therefore black develops a knight to a modest square e7. White continues with queen to g3, and as you may notice, it's very straightforward threat. White can capture the pawn. Of course, by now it seems that black can protect it very easily by doing a natural move, costly. And yet, it allows white to continue, or at some point even to begin his attack. White plays pawn to h4. Now what's the purpose of this move? Instead of pawn to h4, White could have tried to start his assault right away by playing bishop to h6, taking advantage of the pin over the g file. And at first it may sound like a powerful move, but you may notice Black can cover his king fairly easily just by playing knight to g6, and the White's attack is over. And that's the reason why White decided to push his h-pawn, because by doing so he can keep that knight away. Anyway, this is just a sideline. Let's come back to the main game. Here White played pawn to h4, because that pawn can possibly help White in his attack in the future. Black still plays knight to g6. He feels that there is some sort of danger around his king and he wants to cover it. White continues pawn to h5, knight to e5, attacking the White's bishop on c4, and now of course Black probably expected the bishop to retreat, but White found a much more powerful continuation. He played bishop to g5, attacking Black's queen on d8. As you may notice, there was the only square available for the queen to go to, therefore Black played queen to e8, and at this point, there is a winning continuation for White. It's a little bit of a complex operation because you need to calculate a few moves ahead, but anyway, give it a try. Can you find the winning continuation in this game? Try to calculate the lines for a few seconds. Were you able to find anything powerful? White has the move bishop f6, which wins the game on the spot. Right now the threat is very straightforward, but it's going to capture the pawn on g7. Notice that the pawn cannot capture the bishop because it's big, or it's Black's king behind it. Therefore, the only way for Black to somehow attack the g7 square is to move the pawn forward, play pawn to g6. But of course, now White wants to capture that pawn, and what can Black do? In case he captures with the h-pawn, there is a fairly obvious checkmate in one move by playing rook to h8. By the way, this is a very common tactical pattern, or rather the setup of the White pieces, with the bishop standing here and rook at h8. You will find this kind of pattern in many tactical exercises as well as in practical games. That's why definitely Black shouldn't recapture by the pawn. Instead, he wants to capture by the knight. And at first, it may seem that there's no easy way for White to continue his attack. By the way, Black is also going to capture the pawn on e4 and disturb the White's king. Can you notice what can White do instead? Oh yeah, he's got a lot more stronger idea. He can grab that knight to g6, forcing Black to recapture, which allows White to deliver that mate rook to h8. That was the trap number 2, and I hope that you also remembered this tactical pattern because, as I said earlier, the bishop on f6 really controls all the squares around the Black's king, and therefore, if you can just deliver your bishop there, that'll create a lot of checkmate opportunities for you. That's been the trap number 2, and let's move on to the third trap. Interesting that it is a practical game, and in this game, White actually did not find the winning continuation, even though he set a really clever trap, but unfortunately he couldn't find the winning continuation himself. Let's try to do it now. In this case, Black played bishop e7, White replied with knight to c3, knight f6, bishop d2. It's fairly common for White in this opening to prepare a long castling because White's queen is already developed, therefore it's somewhat easier for White to prepare a long side castling. White played pawn to d5, kind of very natural move. Usually, in an opening, both sides are trying to fight for the control over the central squares. And of course, there's no other way for Black to develop his queen side pieces anyway. White recaptured, and even though, of course, Black could just take pawn by his knight, instead he played knight d4, which also looks interesting. Knight is attacking that pawn on c2, which would be a dream capture for Black, of course, because it attacks all of the White's valuable pieces. And Black is preparing to grab on d5 with this knight on the next move. White castled. White took on d5 with the knight from f6 because he just realized that in case White recaptures, instead of simply grabbing the knight back, he can make an intermediate move, winning the pawn and weakening the White's kingside position, or rather I should say castle position. White took the pawn, it's check that for white has to react. White moved the king and now black took back the knight. Black was probably happy at this point. Because of this intermediate capture knight takes a2, black managed to win a pawn and also somewhat compromise the position of the white king. In the actual game, white tried to attack by playing rook to e1, hoping to somehow attack along the e-file, but black simply replied bishop to e6, closing the line, and nothing happened. Black won this game afterwards. If you wish to see the entire game, you can download the BGN file with all the games that I'm going to show you in these lessons. You can find the link down below in the video description. But let's see if white could do anything better. And definitely white could. There is actually a winning situation. White here should have played pawn to b3. With a very straightforward threat of taking the knight, and here black would have to regret about his decision to move his knight so further away from his forces. The only way for black to take the knight would be to move the knight back to b4. But here there is another common tactical pattern that I would like you to remember. Notice that in the black position there are some pieces, in particular the queen and the knight, that are somewhat distant from the rest of the forces of black. And these pieces, they're not really well protected by other pieces of black. We call them hanging pieces, meaning that they are somewhat shaky. In case you notice hanging pieces in opponent's position, you always can try to look for the ways to take advantage of this situation. And in this case, this way exists. Can you find the winning continuation for white here? Of course, white can't just take that knight on b4 because in that case, white would be able to recapture white's rook on d1. Therefore, here, white would simply lose the exchange. But there is a better thing that white can do. And if you are careful listening to